They had no natural weapons like claws or venom or armored skin, and they could not survive in extreme temperatures, and they needed to eat and drink and sleep so often that it seemed like a joke. And Valeth wondered how they had even survived long enough to build their little civilization. They are prey animals who learn to use tools, a combat instructor had told her years ago, and that is all they will ever be. And when the Empire comes for them, they will kneel or they will die, and either way the outcome is the same. Valeth believed this completely because she had no reason to doubt it. And she entered her scout ship with confidence and began her descent toward the planet's surface. The plan was simple and perfect, like all Zoran plans. And she would land in a remote area and disguise herself using the shape-shifting technology her people had perfected. And she would walk among the humans and study them up close. And then she would send her report and return home as a hero. But the universe had different plans for Princess Valeth of the Zoran Empire. Something went wrong during atmospheric entry, and alarms began screaming in her cockpit, and she fought with the controls as her ship shook and burned around her. And she realized with horror that she was going to crash. The impact was violent and terrible, and Valeth felt pain explode through her body as her ship carved a long trench through a field of some yellow crop. And when everything finally stopped moving, she hung upside down in her harness and tasted blood in her mouth. She did not know how long she stayed there, drifting in and out of consciousness, but eventually she managed to free herself and crawl out of the wreckage. And she collapsed on the strange earth soil and looked up at a sky that was too blue and too bright. Her ship was destroyed beyond repair, and her long-range communicator was broken, and her emergency beacon would take months to reach the fleet. And she was stranded on this primitive world with no way to escape. This was not supposed to happen. And Valeth felt something she had never felt before. And it took her a moment to recognize it as fear. She heard a sound then, a rumbling mechanical noise that grew louder. And she tried to stand, but her legs would not cooperate. And she could only watch as a primitive ground vehicle approached and stopped nearby. A human emerged from the vehicle, and Valeth saw that it was a female with brown skin and black hair streaked with gray. And the female walked toward her with an expression that Valeth could not read. Valeth's universal translator was still working at least, and she heard the human speak words that made no sense to her. "Oh my goodness, are you all right? Do you need help? What happened here?" The human knelt beside her without any hesitation or fear, and Valeth stared at her in confusion because this was not how prey was supposed to behave when faced with a predator. "I am," Valeth started to say, and then she stopped, because she did not know how to finish that sentence. And she was still trying to understand why this human was touching her arm gently instead of running away. "My name is Elena Rios, and I live just down the road. And I saw the smoke and came to check. And honey, you look like you have been through something terrible. Can you stand? My truck is right there, and I can take you somewhere safe." Valeth wanted to laugh at the idea that this fragile human could take her anywhere, but she was injured and alone and had no better options. So she allowed Elena to help her to her feet. The human was stronger than she looked, and she supported Valeth's weight without complaint as they walked slowly to the vehicle. And she helped Valeth climb inside and then got in herself and began driving. "I do not understand," Valeth said finally. "Why are you helping me? You do not know who I am or where I came from." Elena glanced at her and smiled, and it was a warm smile that made lines appear around her eyes. "Well, I saw someone who needed help and I stopped. That is just what you do, and we can figure out the rest later. But right now, you need to get cleaned up and maybe see a doctor. Though I am guessing from your ship back there that a regular doctor might not be much use." Valeth felt her whole body go tense, and she prepared herself for the fear and the screaming that would surely come now that the human had acknowledged what she was. But Elena just kept driving and kept smiling. "Relax, honey. I have seen a lot of strange things in my 62 years on this earth, and a woman falling from the sky is definitely in the top 5. But I learned a long time ago that panicking does not solve anything. So how about we start with something simple? Do you have a name? I am Princess Valith of the Zoran Empire, she said, and she waited for the reaction that never came. Well, Princess, you are about to see the Rias family farm, and it is not much to look at, but it is home, and you are welcome to stay until you figure out your next move. Valith did not know what to say, and so she said nothing, and she watched the strange flat landscape pass by the window and wondered what kind of world she had landed on. Everything she had been taught about humans told her that this Elena should be terrified, should be submissive, should be weak, but the woman beside her was none of those things. And Valith felt the first tiny crack form in everything she thought she knew. The Rias farm was small and old, and nothing like the grand structures of the Zoran homeworld. And Valith spent her first night there, lying awake in a tiny bedroom and wondering how her life had gone so wrong so quickly. She was a princess of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and now she was sleeping in a house made of wood and stone, surrounded by fields of crops she did not recognize, waiting for a rescue that might never come. Her injuries healed faster than a human would heal because Zoran bodies were built for war, but she was still weak and tired, and she had no choice but to accept Elena's hospitality until she could figure out another plan. Elena asked very few questions in those first days, and Valith did not understand this at all, because if their positions were reversed, she would have demanded answers immediately and possibly used force to get them. But Elena simply showed her where the bathroom was and gave her clean clothes and cooked food that Valith could actually eat. And she talked about simple things like the weather and the crops and the neighbor's dog that kept digging under the fence. "Why are you not afraid of me?" Valith asked on the third morning. And she was sitting at the kitchen table while Elena made something called pancakes. Elena flipped a pancake in the pan and did not even turn around when she answered, "Should I be afraid of you? I am not human. I come from a civilization that could destroy your entire planet. I could kill you with my bare hands if I wanted to. Could you now?" Elena said. And she finally turned around and looked at Valith with those calm brown eyes. "Well, I suppose that is true, but you have not killed me yet. And you have been very polite about using the bathroom and saying please and thank you. So I figure we are doing all right." Valith opened her mouth to argue but found that she had no words. And Elena just smiled and put a plate of pancakes in front of her. "Eat your breakfast, honey. You are too skinny." The days turned into weeks, and Valith found herself falling into the rhythm of life on the farm. And it was nothing like what she expected. Elena woke up every day before the sun rose, and she worked until long after it set. And she did this alone because there was no one else to help her. And she did it even when her body was clearly exhausted and in pain. Valith watched her from the porch one morning as Elena walked out to check on the crops, and she noticed for the first time that the human woman limped badly on her left leg. "What happened to your leg?" she asked. When Elena returned, Elena wiped sweat from her forehead and shrugged like it was nothing important. "Car accident about 8 years back, shattered my hip and my knee. Doctor said I might never walk again, but I told them that was not an option. Took me 2 years of therapy, but I got back on my feet. That must have been very difficult. It was the hardest thing I ever did physically," Elena said. "But I had the farm to take care of, and I was not about to let some broken bones stop me." Valith thought about this for a long time after Elena went back to work. And she could not understand it, because in the Zoran Empire, someone with such injuries would be considered damaged and useless. They would be sent away to live in the care facilities and never expected to contribute again. But Elena had refused that fate and had fought her way back to strength through nothing but determination. And now she ran this farm by herself, even though every step must cause her pain. It did not make sense according to everything Valith had been taught her. Few days later, a terrible storm came through the area, and the wind and rain lasted for hours. And when it was finally over, Elena walked out to survey the damage, and Valith followed her half. The crops were destroyed, flattened by the wind and drowned by the flooding. And Valith watched Elena stand in the middle of the ruined field and look around at everything she had. Lost. Surely now the human would break. Valith thought, surely this was too much, even for someone as stubborn as Elena. Elena stood there for a long time without moving. And when she finally turned around, Valith could see tears on her cheeks. But there was something else in her eyes too. Something hard and unbreakable. Well, Elena said, and her voice was steady even though she was crying. I guess we better start cleaning up. That is your response? Valith asked, and she could not hide her disbelief. Half your livelihood is gone and you just want to clean up. What else would I do? Sit here and cry until the rest of it rots. The storm came and the storm went, and there is nothing I can do to change that. But I can save what is left if I start now. Elena walked past her toward the barn to get tools. And Valith stood alone in the ruined field and felt something shift inside her chest. That night she found Elena sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere. And the human woman was writing numbers and muttering to herself. And she looked more tired than Valith had ever seen her. What are you doing? Trying to figure out how to survive until next harvest, Elena said without looking up. It is going to be close. It is going to be very close. But I think I can make it work if I sell the back 40 and take on some extra jobs in town. This seems like an impossible situation. Elena finally looked up at her and smiled. And it was not a happy smile, but it was not a defeated one either. Honey, I've been in impossible situations before, and I am still here. So either they were not as impossible as they seemed, or I am just too stubborn to know when to quit. Why do you not just give up? Valith asked, and she was genuinely confused. Your life is clearly full of hardship and pain. Would it not be easier to simply stop fighting? Elena leaned back in her chair and looked at Valith for a long moment, and her eyes held a depth of experience that made Valith feel young despite her 150 years. Let me tell you something, princess. Giving up is always easier. That is the one thing you can count on. But easy is not the same as right. And it is definitely not the same as worthwhile. She stood up and walked to the window and looked out at the dark fields beyond. I have lost almost everything that matters to me in this life. And I am still standing. And do you know why? Because the people I lost would want me to keep standing. Because the land my grandparents worked deserves someone to take care of it. Because tomorrow the sun will rise and there will be work to do, and I plan to be there to do it. Valith felt the crack in her certainty grow wider. And she began to wonder if everything the Zoran Empire believed about humans was completely and utterly wrong. 2 months had passed since Valith crashed on Earth, and she had learned many things about the planet and its people. But she had learned the most important things from Elena Rhea. She had learned that humans ate 3 times a day and needed 8 hours of sleep and could only survive in a narrow range of temperatures. And by Zoran standards, this made them incredibly weak and inefficient, but she had also learned that humans kept going when their bodies told them to stop. And they laughed when they were in pain, and they helped strangers for no reason other than kindness. And these things did not fit the definition of weakness at all. It was a Sunday morning when Elena invited Valith to come with her on what she called her weekly visit. And Valith agreed because she was curious about everything. Elena did now. They drove in the old truck down a winding road until they reached a small hill with a fence around it. And Valith saw rows of stone markers in the grass and realized this was a place where humans buried their dead. Elena parked the truck and got out and gathered a bundle of wildflowers she had picked that morning. And Valith followed her through the gate and up the gentle slope. They stopped at 3 stones that stood together under a large tree. And Elena knelt down and placed flowers in front of each one. And Valith read the names carved into the stone: Marcus Reyes, beloved husband. Taken too soon, Daniel Reyes, beloved son. Who gave everything for his country, Sophia Reyes, beloved daughter. Forever in our hearts. Valith stood in silence as Elena touched each stone gently and spoke softly, telling them about the week and the farm and the strange visitor who had fallen from the sky. And her voice was full of love and sadness mixed together when they returned to the truck. Valith finally asked the question that was burning inside her. Who were they? Elena started driving and did not answer right away. And when she did, her voice was quiet but steady. Marcus was my husband for 31 years. We met when we were 17 and got married when we were 20, and he was the best man I ever knew. He got sick about 12 years ago. Cancer, they said. And he fought it for 2 years before it took him. She paused to wipe her eyes, but kept driving. Daniel was our son. He joined the army when he was 18 because he wanted to help people. He was always like that, even as a little boy. Always wanting to help. He died overseas 9 years ago. They gave us a flag and a medal and told us he was a hero. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Sophia was our daughter. She was 2 years younger than Daniel. She became a nurse because she wanted to help people too. 3 years ago, she was driving home from a late shift and a drunk driver crossed into her lane. I was in the car with her because she had picked me up from the hospital where I was getting my hip checked. Valith remembered Elena's limp and suddenly understood. You were injured in the same accident that killed your daughter. Yes. I woke up in the hospital and they told me Sophia did not make it. And I thought about just giving up right then. I thought about letting the broken bones win and never walking again. Never doing anything again. But you did not give up. No, I did not. And do you know why? Elena pulled the truck over to the side of the road and turned to look at Valith directly. And her eyes were wet with tears, but her gaze was strong. Because Marcus would have told me to get up and keep fighting. Because Daniel did not die so that his mother could waste away feeling sorry for herself. Because Sophia spent her whole life helping people and she would never forgive me if I stopped living mine. So you continue for them. I continue because of them and with them, Elena said. They are not gone, princess. Not really. I carry them with me every single day and everything I do. Every morning, I wake up and I work the land that Marcus and I built together. Every time I help someone, I think of Daniel and Sophia, who dedicated their lives to helping others. She started driving again, and her voice grew stronger. That is what humans do, Valith. We lose the people we love. We all do eventually. But we do not let them disappear. We carry them with us. We let their love and their memory make us stronger instead of weaker. Valith thought about this for a long time, and she compared it to how her own people handled loss in the Zoran Empire. Grief was considered a disease, something to be suppressed and eliminated as quickly as possible. When someone died, their name was rarely spoken again, and those who mourned too long were seen as damaged and weak. But Elena wore her grief openly, and it had not destroyed her. Instead, it had become part of her strength. The love she carried for her lost family was like fuel that kept her moving forward. I do not understand how you can bear so much pain, Valith said finally. You do not bear it alone, Elena replied. That is the secret. You share it with others. With friends and neighbors and even strangers sometimes. Humans are not meant to carry their burdens by themselves. We are meant to help each other. My people believe that needing help is a sign of weakness. Elena laughed. And it was not a mocking laugh, but a warm one. While your people have it backwards then, needing help is just being alive. Giving help is what makes life worth living. That evening, Valith sat on the porch and watched the sun set over the fields. And she thought about everything Elena had told her. And she felt like her entire understanding of the universe was being rebuilt from the ground. Up the Zoran Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, and they had done it by being strong and ruthless and never showing any weakness. And Valeth had always believed this was the correct way to live, but Elena Reyes had lost her husband and her son and her daughter. She had been broken in body and spirit. She had faced disaster after disaster. And she was still standing, still working, still smiling, still helping strangers who fell from the sky. That was not weakness. Valeth realized that was something else entirely. Something the Zoran Empire had never encountered before. Something they had no name for because they had never thought to look for Elena. Came out onto the porch and handed Valeth a cup of something warm and sat down beside her. You are thinking very hard about something. I am thinking about strength, Valeth said. And about what it really means. Elena sipped her drink and nodded slowly. And what have you figured out? I think my people have been wrong about humans. I think we saw your short lives and your fragile bodies and your many wars, and we assumed you were weak. But we missed something important. What did you miss? Valeth turned to look at Elena. This small human woman who had survived more tragedy than most Zoran warriors would ever face. We missed the part where you keep going anyway. We missed the love and the hope and the stubbornness. We looked at all the reasons humans should give up, and we never noticed that you almost never do. Elena smiled and patted Valeth's hand gently. Now you are starting to understand us, princess. Now you are starting to see. Valeth looked back at the sunset and felt something new growing in her chest. Something that felt like doubt and wonder and fear all mixed together. And she knew that when the Zoran fleet came, she would have to make a choice. She would have to decide what kind of strength she believed in. 3 months after Valeth crashed on Earth, her communicator crackled to life with a signal from the Zoran fleet. And everything changed in an instant. She was helping Elena repair the fence around the chicken coop when the device on her wrist began to glow and vibrate. And she stepped away and listened to the message with her heart pounding in her chest. Princess Valeth, this is Command Ship Eternal Victory. We have received your emergency beacon and we are approaching Earth. Our arrival time is 7 planetary days. Prepare for extraction and report on enemy defenses. The message ended and Valeth stood frozen in the middle of the yard. And she felt like the ground was shifting beneath her feet. Even though she was standing perfectly still. Elena walked over and looked at her with concern in her eyes. What is wrong, honey? You look like you have seen a ghost. My people are coming, Valeth said. And her voice sounded strange in her own ears. They will be here in 1 week, and they expect me to have a report ready. They expect me to tell them how to conquer your world. Elena was quiet for a moment, and then she nodded slowly and wiped her hands on her jeans. Well, I guess we both knew this day would come eventually. What are you going to tell them? That was the question that burned in Valeth's mind for the next 7 days. And she could not find an answer that did not feel like betrayal if she told the truth about human weakness. If she reported what the Empire expected to hear, then the invasion would proceed as planned, and Earth would fall and billions of humans would die or be enslaved. But if she told the real truth about human strength, the truth she had learned from Elena, then she would be defying everything she had been raised to believe and everything her father demanded of her. Spent the week in a state of constant torment. And Elena did not push her or ask questions. She just kept working on the farm and kept making meals and kept being the steady presence that Valeth had come to depend on. Night before the fleet was scheduled to arrive, Valeth found Elena sitting on the porch, looking up at the stars. You are not afraid, Valeth said. And it was not a question because she could see that it was true. I am terrified, Elena replied. But being afraid does not mean you get to stop living. I learned that a long time ago. I do not know what to do. Elena patted the chair beside her and Valeth sat down. And they looked at the stars together in silence for a while. Let me ask you something, princess, in all your time here, have you seen anything that makes you want to destroy us? Vela thought about the question carefully before answering. No. I have seen kindness and courage and love. I have seen you and your neighbors helping each other after the storm. I have seen children playing in the streets of town. I have seen old people holding hands in the park. And is that weakness? No, Valeth admitted. It is not weakness at all. Then you already know what you have to do. You just have to be brave enough to do it. The next day, the fleet arrived, and Valeth was transported to the command ship where her father, the Emperor, was waiting for her. And she walked into the throne room and knelt before him as tradition demanded. Emperor Kelthon looked exactly as she remembered him. Tall and powerful with silver skin and eyes like black holes. And his voice echoed through the chamber when he spoke, "Rise, daughter, and deliver your report. Tell me about the humans and their defenses." Valeth stood and looked at her father. And she thought about Elena and Marcus and Daniel and Sophia. She thought about all the humans she had watched living their short, precious lives. And she made her choice. They are weak, she said. And her voice was steady, even though her hearts were racing. They die easily. They hurt constantly. They lose everyone they love, and they know from the day they are born that they will lose more. The Emperor smiled a cold smile and nodded. Good. Then we will proceed with the invasion. They will fall within a single cycle. No. The word came out before Valeth could stop it. And she saw surprise flash across her father's face. An expression she had never seen on him before. No. What do you mean, no? Explain yourself, daughter. I mean, you do not understand. You think what I said describes weakness, but you are wrong. Father, please listen to me. She stepped forward and spoke with all the conviction she had built over 3 months. Humans know they will die. They know they will lose everything, and they choose to love anyway. They build homes knowing earthquakes will knock them down. They plant crops knowing storms will destroy them. They have children knowing those children will someday stand over their graves. This is foolishness, the Emperor said. This is the behavior of irrational creatures. No, it is not. It is the behavior of creatures who have found something more important than survival. They call it hope. They call it love. They call it humanity. And it is the strongest force I have ever witnessed. The Emperor's eyes narrowed dangerously. You have been contaminated by them. I can see it in your eyes. My own daughter has been made weak by these pathetic beings. I have not been made weak, father. I have been made to see the truth. If you invade this world, you will win battles, yes. Your technology is superior, and your warriors are stronger. But you will never truly conquer them. Explain, because they do not surrender. They cannot surrender. It is not in their nature. They will fight you for 100 generations. They will resist you even when resistance is hopeless. They will die by the millions, and the survivors will keep fighting because that is what humans do. She thought of Elena standing in the ruined field, already planning how to rebuild. And she felt tears forming in her eyes. I watched a human woman lose her husband and her son and her daughter. I watched her be broken in body and spirit, and I watched her get up every morning and keep living and keep loving and keep hoping. And she did this not because she is foolish, but because she understands something we have never understood. What does she understand? The Emperor asked. And his voice was cold as ice. That strength is not the absence of pain. Strength is continuing to care when caring brings you nothing but pain. Strength is loving when love means loss. Strength is hoping when hope seems impossible. She stood tall and looked her father directly in the eyes. If you invade Earth, you will make enemies who cannot be defeated because they do not know how to stop fighting. You will create resistance that will burn for centuries. You will win a planet and lose something far more valuable. And what is that? Your peace. Father, your certainty. Because once you face humans who refuse to break, you will never look at conquest the same way again. They will change you just as they changed me." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, and Valeth could see the anger building in his face. And she knew what was coming before he spoke. "You have betrayed your empire and your bloodline. You have been corrupted by the enemy. And for this, there is only one punishment." He raised his hand and guards moved toward her from the shadows. "Princess Violet of the Zoran Empire, you are hereby sentenced to death for treason and sympathizing with a target species. Do you have any final words?" Valeth looked at her father and felt sadness but not regret. "Only that I hope someday you will understand what I have learned. And I hope it does not cost you everything the way it would cost the humans if you invade their world." The guards grabbed her arms, but before they could take her away, alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and voices came over the communication system, reporting a security breach in the shuttle bay. In the confusion that followed, Valeth did something she never thought she would do. She fought back against her own people. She broke free from the guards and ran through corridors she had memorized as a child. And she reached the shuttle and launched herself toward the blue planet below before anyone could stop her. As she flew through the atmosphere with weapons fire streaking past her, she thought about Elena and the farm and the life she had glimpsed. And she made a promise to herself she would not let the humans face this fight alone. Valeth's stolen shuttle screamed through the atmosphere and crashed for the second time in Elena's field. And this time, she managed to walk away from the wreckage on her own 2 feet. Elena was already running from the farmhouse when Valeth emerged. And the older woman stopped a few feet away and looked at her with an expression of relief and concern. "Lord have mercy, girl. I thought you were dead. I saw the ships up there and I heard the explosions, and I did not know what to think. I defied my father," Valeth said. And the words felt strange and heavy on her tongue. "I told him the truth about humans, and he sentenced me to death. But I escaped. You escaped from a whole fleet of warships. I did not have many options." Elena laughed then, a real laugh that came from deep in her chest. And she walked forward and pulled Valeth into a hug that caught the alien princess completely by surprise. "You crazy brave fool," Elena said into her shoulder. "You wonderful crazy brave fool." They went inside, and Valeth told Elena everything that had happened on the command ship, everything she had said to her father, and everything that had led to her desperate escape. When she finished, Elena sat back and shook her head slowly. "So what happens now? Is your father going to invade anyway?" "I do not know," Valeth admitted, "but I do not think so. At least not immediately." "Why not?" "Because I saw something in his eyes when I spoke. Something that might have been doubt, and for a Zoran emperor, doubt is a dangerous thing. It spreads like a virus and infects every decision." She stood and walked to the window and looked up at the sky where she knew the fleet was still orbiting. "My people have conquered many worlds, but we have never faced a species like humanity. We have never faced beings who fight not because they think they can win, but because they cannot imagine surrendering. And you think that scared him? I think it made him uncertain. And for a conqueror, uncertainty is worse than fear. He will need time to think, time to plan, time to convince himself that I was wrong about humans. And were you wrong about us?" Valeth turned back to look at Elena. This small human woman who had taught her more about strength in 3 months than she had learned in 150 years among her own people. "No, I was not wrong, and I think somewhere deep inside he knows it too." The fleet withdrew 3 days later, and Valeth watched them go from Elena's porch with mixed feelings in her hearts. She was relieved that Earth was safe for now, but she was also grieving for the home she would never see again, the family she had lost. The life she had left behind. Elena came out and sat beside her with 2 cups of coffee, and they watched the stars in silence for a while. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked finally. "Sometimes. I miss my world. I miss the things I knew and the certainty I had. But then I remember what that certainty cost, and I know I made the right choice. What did it cost? It cost me the ability to see other beings as less than myself. It cost me the belief that conquest is strength and mercy is weakness. It cost me everything I thought I knew about the universe. Elena nodded and sipped her coffee. That sounds like a heavy price. It was. But what I gained was worth more. I gained the ability to see beauty in vulnerability. I gained the understanding that love is not weakness, but courage. I gained a friend who showed me what real strength looks like. She turned to look at Elena and felt emotion rising in her chest. Thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I did not deserve your kindness, even when I was arrogant and confused and lost. Oh, honey, Elena said. And her eyes were shining with tears. That is what we do, we humans. We keep believing in people, even when they give us every reason not to. We keep hoping even when hope is foolish. I know. I watched you do it. I learned from you. The months that followed were not easy. But Valeth had learned from Elena that the best things in life rarely were. She learned to work the farm, to dig in the dirt and plant seeds and wait patiently for them to grow. And it was so different from the instant gratification of Zoran technology that she found it almost spiritual. She learned to cook human food and to appreciate the strange flavors and textures that her people would have considered primitive. And she learned that sharing a meal with someone was more satisfying than any conquest. She learned about human music and art and stories. And she discovered that these fragile, short-lived beings had created beauty that rivaled anything in the galaxy. Beauty born from pain and loss and the desperate need to leave something behind. Most of all, she learned what it meant to be part of a community, because the neighbors who had been suspicious of her at first gradually came to accept her. And she found herself helping with their farms and attending their celebrations and mourning with them when they lost loved ones. One evening, about a year after the fleet withdrew, Valeth and Elena were sitting on the porch watching the sunset when a young girl from the neighboring farm came running up the path. Miss Elena, Miss Valeth, come quick. My grandmother fell and we cannot get her up. They ran to help. And Valeth found herself lifting the elderly woman as gently as if she were made of glass. And she carried her inside and stayed with the family until the doctor arrived later that night. As they walked home, Elena looked at her with a strange expression. You have changed so much from the princess who crashed in my field. I have learned what matters, Valeth replied. I have learned that helping one person is worth more than conquering 1,000 worlds. And what do you think your father would say about that? Valeth smiled, and it was a smile that felt natural now. That felt human in a way she could never have imagined before. I think he would say, I have become weak, but I know the truth now. I know that what he calls weakness is actually the greatest strength in the universe. And what is that? The courage to care. The willingness to love even though love brings pain. The choice to hope even when hope seems foolish. The determination to keep going when everything tells you to stop. She looked at Elena, this remarkable human who had shown her a different way to live. You taught me that. You and your husband and your son and your daughter. All the humans you carry with you every day. You showed me that strength is not about what you can take. It is about what you choose to give. Elena reached over and took her hand, and they sat together watching the last light fade from the sky. So what comes next for you, princess? Valeth thought about the question for a long time before answering. I do not know exactly, but I know I want to stay here. I want to learn more about your people. I want to help where I can and grow alongside you. This life is hard, Elena warned her. There will be storms and failures and loss. There always is. I know, and I am ready for it. Because you taught me that hard does not mean impossible. You taught me that falling down is not the same as giving up. She squeezed Elena's hand gently. You taught me that the bravest thing anyone can do is not to conquer or to dominate. It is to love knowing that you will lose. and to keep loving anyway. Years passed, and Valith became as much a part of the community as anyone who had been born there. And when people asked why an alien princess had chosen to stay on a small farm in the middle of nowhere, she always gave the same answer: because a human woman taught me that true strength is not measured in battles won or worlds conquered. True strength is measured in the love you give, and the hope you carry, and the choice you make every morning to get up and try again. And what about your people? Do you think they will ever come back? Perhaps someday. But when they do, I hope they will find what I found. I hope they will meet humans who show them a different way to be strong. Elena passed away peacefully in her sleep 5 years after the fleet withdrew. And Valith stood over her grave with wildflowers in her hands and tears streaming down her face, but she did not give up. She did not surrender to grief. Because Elena had taught her better than that instead. She went home to the farm that was now hers, and she got up the next morning and went to work. Because the crops needed tending, and the neighbors needed helping, and life needed living, and every Sunday she visited the graves on the hill. Marcus and Daniel and Sophia and now Elena. And she told them about her week in the farm and the life she was building in their honor. Because that is what you do when you carry someone with you. You keep going, you keep loving, you keep hoping forever.